There is a number floating around that is supposed to tell you whether you are on track for retirement. By 50, you should have this much. By 60, that much. And if you are like most people, the moment you hear those numbers, your stomach drops. You are nowhere near them. So let me tell you two true things before we start. The benchmark is real, and it is useful. And the median household in their late 50s has saved a fraction of it and will still be okay. Both of those are true at the same time. By the end of this, you will understand exactly why and what to do if you are behind. Because most of you are behind, and the fix is far more ordinary than you think. We are going to do three things. First, walk the benchmark age by age with real dollars so you know the target. Second, look at what people actually have and why the gap is less frightening than it looks. And third, if you are behind, run the 4 levers that move a retirement forward in order of how much they matter. Grab your last statement if you want to play along. Let us start with where the number even comes from. Benchmark you have seen is almost always some version of a salary multiple. It says you should have saved a certain multiple of your current income by a certain age. A common version runs like this. 1 times your salary saved by 30, 3 times by 40, 6 times by 50, 8 times by 60, and around 10 times your salary by 67. It is a clean, memorable rule, and that is exactly why it spreads. But a rule that queen has to hide a lot of assumptions to stay that short, and you deserve to see them, because they change everything. Assumption 1. It assumes you save steadily, something like 15% of your income every year, for decades. Almost nobody does that without gaps. Job losses, raising kids, a bad year, they all punch holes in it. Assumption 2. It assumes you retire at 67 and not before. Retire earlier and the multiple you need goes up because your money has to last longer and grow less. Assumption 3. And this is the big one. It already counts on Social Security to do part of the work. The multiple is not the whole cost of your retirement. It is the piece your savings has to cover after Social Security covers the rest. That is why the number is 10 times your salary and not 25. Hold on to that point, because it is the single most misunderstood thing about the whole benchmark. When people see 10 times salary and panic, they are usually forgetting that a big chunk of their retirement is already paid for by a check that arrives every month for the rest of their life. Now, let us walk the ages. Let us make it concrete with a normal income. Say you earn $70,000 a year, which is close to a typical household. We will carry that same salary through all 4 ages so you can see the shape. At 50, the guideline says roughly 6 times your salary. 6 times 70,000 is $420,000. I want to be honest about how that number lands, because for a lot of 50-year-olds, 420,000 feels like it is from another planet. If you are sitting at 150,000 or 80,000, or you are starting closer to 0 after a divorce or a business that did not work out, that 6 times number can feel less like a target and more like a judgment. It is not a judgment. 50 is the age where the benchmark starts to feel real, and also the age where you still have real time. You likely have 15 to 17 working years left, and those are usually your highest earning years, with the mortgage further along and the kids more independent. 50 is not too late. 50 is when the catch-up tools we will get to actually switch on. So note the 6 times number, note where you actually are, and do not do anything with gap yet except write it down. We are going to close it deliberately, not with panic. At 55, the guideline sits at about 7 times your salary. On our $70,000 income, that is roughly $490,000. 55 is an interesting, underrated age because 2 things change at once. First is emotional. Retirement stops being an abstraction. You can see it from here, and that tends to make people either oversave out of fear or freeze out of despair. Neither helps. The second is practical, and it is good news. At 55, you are deep into your catch-up years, and if you have a workplace plan, there is a rule that some people who leave a job at 55 or later reach that plan's money without the usual early withdrawal penalty. It is a narrow rule with conditions, so verify it for your own plan, but it exists, and it matters for people planning an earlier exit. Here is the honest picture at 55. The median household headed by someone 55 to 64 has saved somewhere around $185,000. Look at that against the 7 times benchmark of $490,000. Typical household is at roughly a third of the guideline. Sit with that for a second, because it tells you something important. If the typical person is at a third of the benchmark, then being behind the benchmark is not the exception. It is the normal condition. The entire retirement system, including Social Security, is built around that reality, not around the tidy multiple. At 60, the guideline is about 8 times salary. 8 times 70,000 is $560,000. 60 is the age where the questions get sharper, because the runway is short and the decisions start to lock in. It is also the age where a lot of people quietly discover that their real number is different from the benchmark in both directions. Some people find they need less than 8 times because their spending is lower than their salary ever was. They paid off the house, the kids are gone. We're living on 60% of their income and saving or servicing debt with the rest. If you only actually spend $45,000 a year, your target is built on 45, not on 70. Other people find they need more than 8 times because they want to retire before 67, or they carry a mortgage into retirement, or they have no pension and a health situation that means real medical costs. Benchmark is an average, and you are not average in every direction. So at 60, the job is to stop using the generic multiple and start using your multiple. Take what you actually plan to spend in a year, subtract what Social Security and any pension will cover, and the gap is what your savings has to fund. That gap, divided by a safe withdrawal rate, is your real target. We taught that math in an earlier episode, so I will not rerun all of it here, but it's the number that matters at 60, not 8 times a salary you might not even spend. At 65, the guideline is roughly 9 to 10 times salary. Call it around $650,000 on our $70,000 income, on the way to 10 times by 67. 65 is a milestone for a reason that has nothing to do with the savings multiple. It is when Medicare begins. That single fact removes one of the scariest unknowns in early retirement, cost of health insurance before 65, and it is why so many people target 65 specifically. At 65, the benchmark is almost beside the point, because you are close enough to run the real thing. You know your Social Security estimate to the dollar. You know your actual spending. You know your balances. So instead of asking whether you hit 10 times your salary, you ask the only question that counts. Does my guaranteed income plus a safe draw from my savings cover the life I actually want to live? For plenty of people at 65, the answer is yes, even though they never came close to the multiple, because their spending is modest and Social Security covers most of it. For others, the answer is not yet, and that is not a failure either. It is information, and it points at the levers, which is where we are headed. First, let us deal with the gap head on, because I suspect a lot of you have been quietly doing subtraction this whole time and feeling worse. If you are behind the benchmark, you are not an outlier. You are the median. So let me give you the 3 honest reasons the gap looks more dangerous than it usually is. Reason 1. Social Security replaces more of a modest income than people expect. For someone who earned around the national average their whole career, Social Security can replace something like 40% of their pre-retirement income, and for lower earners, it replaces even more. That is a large slice of the problem solved by a check you already earned. The savings multiple only ever had to cover the rest. Reason 2. The benchmark assumes you want to replace your entire paycheck, and almost nobody spends in retirement what they spent while working. You are no longer saving for retirement because you are in it. You are no longer paying payroll taxes on wages. The commute is gone, the work wardrobe is gone, and very often the mortgage is gone. Most retirees spend meaningfully less than their final salary, which means the real target was always lower than the multiple implied. Reason 3. Paid-off house is a retirement asset that never shows up in the savings number. If your home is paid off, your single biggest monthly expense, housing, drops to taxes and upkeep. It does not show in your 401k balance, but it does more for your retirement security than another $100,000 in the account would. None of this means the gap is imaginary. It means the gap is smaller and more fixable than a scary multiple makes it feel. Now let us fix it. The first lever is the one the tax code hands you specifically because you are behind, and it switches on at 50. Once you turn 50, you can put more into your retirement accounts than younger people can. There is a catch-up amount on top of the regular limit for your workplace plan, and a separate catch-up on top of the regular limit for an IRA. Verify the current numbers at irs.gov because they move with inflation, but the extra room is thousands of dollars a year in the workplace plan alone. And there is a newer wrinkle worth knowing. For a few specific ages in your early 60s, The workplace catch-up is even larger than the standard 50-plus catch-up. It is a bigger door, open for only a few years, and it is designed for exactly the person who is trying to make up ground right before the finish line. If you are in your early 60s and behind, find out whether your plan offers it, because most people have never heard of it. Here is why this lever is more powerful than it looks. Every dollar you catch up with in a pre-tax account also lowers your taxable income this year, so the government is effectively helping you fund it. And because you are close to retirement, that money does not need to survive a 30-year market cycle before you touch it. It goes in, it gets a few years to grow, and it is there. Catch-up contributions will not, by themselves, turn $80,000 into $600,000. No single lever does. But stacked with the next three, they are real, and they are the easiest to start. You can often change your contribution this week with a form. The second lever is the most powerful one there is, and almost nobody gives it the credit it deserves. It is working a little longer. I know that is not what anyone wants to hear. So let me show you why it does so much, because it is not one benefit. It is 4 benefits at once, stacked. 1. You keep adding to savings instead of drawing from it. Every extra year is a year of contributions plus growth instead of withdrawals. 2. It is 1 fewer year your money has to last. A retirement that starts at 66 instead of 62 is 4 years shorter to fund on both ends. 3. And this is the quiet giant. Delaying Social Security. For each year you wait to claim past your full retirement age, up to age 70, your benefit grows by about 8% for life, and adjusted for inflation on top of that. There is no investment on earth that guarantees you an 8% annual raise with no risk. Waiting from 62 to 70 can increase your monthly check by more than 70%. Verify the current figures at ssa.gov, but the size of this is hard to overstate. 4. Those extra working years are often near your peak earnings, which can replace some of the low earning years in the formula that sets your benefit, nudging it up further. Put those together, and 1 or 2 more years of work is frequently worth more than a decade of aggressive saving earlier in life. You do not have to work until you drop. But if you are behind, the phrase 2 more years is not a punishment. It is probably the strongest single move on this entire list. Third lever is the one people forget exists, because we are trained to only think about the size of the pile. But a ratio has 2 numbers, and you can move either one. The target is the other number, and lowering it counts just as much as adding to savings. This is not about deprivation, it is about precision. Most people have never actually added up what they will spend in retirement. They just assume it equals their current paycheck, and then they measure themselves against a benchmark built on that assumption, and they feel doomed. So do the real exercise. Write down what you actually expect to spend, month by month, in the retirement you actually want. Not your salary, your spending. For a lot of people that number comes in well below what they earn now, once the mortgage, the commute, the kid costs, and the retirement saving itself all fall away. Then look at the pieces you control. Downsizing the house can turn home equity into spendable money and cut the running costs at the same time. Where you live changes your tax and insurance and healthcare costs, and we did a whole episode on running that math honestly. Even the timing of one big goal, like a paid-for car every 10 years instead of every 5, moves the number. Every $1,000 a year you take off your spending target is worth roughly $25,000 you do not need to have saved, because at a 4% withdrawal rate, $25,000 of savings is what produces $1,000 a year. Read that again. Trimming $1,000 a year of spending does the same work as saving an extra $25,000. That is the most underrated math in retirement planning. The fourth lever ties the others together. It is the idea of a floor, and it is what lets people who are behind on the benchmark still retire with genuine peace of mind. Here is the idea. Divide your spending into 2 buckets. The essentials, the things that must be paid no matter what: housing, food, utilities, insurance, healthcare. And everything else, the travel, the gifts, the restaurants, the extras, that make retirement enjoyable, but that you could dial back in a bad year. The goal of the floor is simple. Cover all of your essentials with guaranteed income that arrives no matter what the stock market does. For most people, that guaranteed income is Social Security, and for some it is Social Security plus a pension or an annuity they choose to build. When your essentials are covered by a floor, something powerful happens to the savings question. Your savings no longer has to keep you alive, it only has to fund the extras. And a pile of money that only needs to cover the fun stuff can be far smaller and can ride out a bad market far more calmly than a pile that has to cover survival. This is why a paid-off house plus a well-timed Social Security claim is worth so much. The house removes the biggest essential from the equation. The claim, timed late, makes the guaranteed check as large as possible. Together, they can lift your floor above your essentials, and at that point, being behind on some salary, multiples simply stops being the emergency it felt like at the start of this video. Let me make all of this concrete with 2 households, because numbers on their own do not stick. Meet Karen and Dave, both 60. Between them, they earn about $90,000 a year, and they have saved $430,000. Against the 8 times benchmark for their income, which would be over $700,000, they are behind. On paper, they would fail the test in the thumbnail of most videos. Now run their real numbers. Their house is paid off. They actually spend about $55,000 a year, not $90,000, because the mortgage and the kid costs are gone. Their combined Social Security, if they wait until 67, will be around $42,000 a year. So their guaranteed floor covers $42,000 of their $55,000 of spending. Gap they need from savings is about $13,000 a year. $13,000 a year from $430,000 of savings is a withdrawal rate of about 3%. That is comfortable, well inside safe territory. Karen and Dave are behind the benchmark and completely on track in real life, and they only know that because they ran their actual spending instead of a salary multiple. Now meet Paul, 55, single, earning $60,000 a year, with $140,000 saved. He is well behind the benchmark, which would put him near $400,000, and unlike Karen and Dave, his real numbers do not rescue him on their own. He rents, so there is no paid-off house, and a single income means a single Social Security check with no spouse's benefit beside it. Paul is exactly the person these videos usually scare and then abandon. So let us actually use the levers. Lever 1, catch-up. Paul bumps his contribution to capture the full 50-plus catch-up in his workplace plan, and it lowers his tax bill, which frees up a little more. Lever 2, a few more years. Paul plans to work to 67 instead of 62. That is 12 more years of contributions and growth, 5 fewer years of drawdown, and a Social Security check that is dramatically larger for waiting. Lever 3, the target. Paul looks honestly at his spending and finds he can build a retirement around $38,000 a year rather than his full $60,000 salary, especially if he keeps renting a modest place. Lever 4, the floor. By claiming Social Security at 67, his guaranteed check covers a large share of that $38,000, so his savings only has to fill a manageable gap. None of those 4 moves is heroic. Paul does not win the lottery or discover a secret investment. He contributes more, works a few more years, right-sizes his life, and times his claim. Stack them, and the man who looked hopeless against the benchmark has an ordinary, workable retirement. That is the whole point of this channel. The benchmark starts the conversation. Levers finish it. Let me turn all of this into something you can actually do in the next few days, because a video you only nod along to changes nothing. 1. Find your multiple. Take your current savings and divide it by your salary. That is your number today. Write it next to the benchmark for your age. Do not judge it, just know it. 2. Find your real target. Take the spending you actually expect in retirement, subtract your Social Security estimate from ssa.gov, and see how big the gap really is. It is almost always smaller than the salary multiple made it feel. 3. Pick one lever and pull it this week. Raise your contribution to grab the catch-up. Or get a real Social Security estimate for claiming at 67 and at 70, and see the difference for yourself. Sit down and write your true monthly spending. One lever, this week. 4. If your head is spinning, that is a sign to talk to a fee-only advisor, one who charges for advice and does not earn a commission for selling you a product. An hour with the right person is worth more than another year of worrying, so here is where we land. Benchmark is a compass, not a verdict. 6 times your salary at 50, 7 at 55, 8 at 60, around 10 by 67, useful for pointing you in a direction. Useless as a scorecard, because it hides your Social Security. It assumes a spending level you may never reach, and ignores the paid-off house that quietly does so much of the work. If you are ahead of it, wonderful, keep going, and do not let it make you greedy. If you are behind it, you are standing with the majority of your neighbors, and the 4 levers that fix a behind retirement are as ordinary as they come. Save a bit more with the catch-up. Work a little longer. Right-size the target. Build a floor under the essentials. Pull one this week and another next month. You do not need to be a statistic on someone's chart. You need your own numbers and a plan you can actually run. That is the whole job. Run your numbers. Know you're on track. If this helped, tell us in the comments which age you were most worried about and which lever you are going to pull first. Read everyone. All figures in this video are illustrative and current as of 2026. The salary multiple guideline is a rule of thumb, not a law, and it is debated. Savings limits, catch-up amounts, and Social Security figures change every year. Verify at irs.gov and ssa.gov, and talk to a fee-only advisor about your own situation. Susan Mitchell is the host of the Retirement Lab and is not a licensed financial advisor, attorney, or accountant.